All right, I think we're rolling now. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name's Zev Gottdiener. I'm the marketing content manager here at Door 3, and I'm joined by Bailey, who is our senior UX designer here at Door 3, and we're going to be talking about a new experience and certification that she just completed.
Yes, hi, I am Bailey Costello. As you said, I'm a senior UX designer here at Door 3, and I'm also kind of considered our resident accessibility specialist. I recently got the opportunity to get certified or get a certification through the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And, it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot through the process. And the idea is that we can, start having more projects that are more focused around accessibility as a whole instead of, kind of just not an afterthought, but, not just like a side goal or a side quest. We want it to be, we want to bring in and have like real accessibility projects.
So, what was the program like for the certification? Was it how long was it? And you did it on the web?
So I just was reading the entire time. And so they had a 80-page document that I went through, and it wasn't exactly what I expected, right? When people think about accessibility, usually they start going and looking for knowledge on the actual WCAG or WCAG like guidelines. This was not about those guidelines at all, really. I mean, it did actually mention it maybe once or twice, but it was more focused on the actual like legislation that has come up or the actual like different kinds of disabilities. So there was a lot of like health and wellness in there and also yeah, I suppose. So I would say like a good like fundamental background of the things you need to know in order to apply what we would as UX designers and developers in practice. So, yeah, a lot of like background knowledge and it was really really interesting to learn about.
Reading is the quickest way to set yourself up for practicing something. That's nice that they add a lot of resources. How did you get interested in accessibility and even bit about that in UX?
Yeah, this is something that I have always cared about. Once I kind of like initially learned about it as like a young designer, it kind of came up, through like Google searching or whatever. And I started hearing about accessibility and I kind of like internalized that, oh, okay, good design is accessible design. And that's something that really, really stuck with me. And then on top of that, the company that I was working for, which is no longer around, but was a kind of B2B company that was for like building reports and doing data analysis. I kind of like actually over like a winter break one year, I was kind of sitting around and like thinking about accessibility and like, oh, this is important, right? Like we need to be inclusive and include people. And then like the more that I kind of thought about it, the more I was thinking, well, the software that I'm working on, it's if somebody who is, for instance, like blind, right? They have to use a keyboard to navigate the internet. They wouldn't at all be able to use like this software, And so essentially, like down the line, what that looks like is that they can't have like a data analyst job if that company were to like use our software. And so to me, it became like this very like real concern, when we're building software for people to use, especially business software, we are like really limiting or like cutting out a part of the market that could otherwise be able to have jobs. So it's very discriminatory, you know, and just like very limiting for people. And we don't want that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's the idea of needing to meet standards and government regulations. And then there's the entire idea of what is and who is the software for, and not just in like a moral or humanistic sense, but even a business sense. The areas of growth and opportunities that are glossed over just by virtue of not thinking about it or not being aware of it. So that is interesting. And did the course go into methodology, not just in UX, but like for businesses in general about um, meeting accessibility, or is it focused more on standards?
It wasn't so much focused on business, but I will say that is something that I learned, through my own research, about somewhere between like 15 and like 25% of the world has some kind of disability.
Sure.
So there is, right, like a quarter of the world, if we're looking at the higher number, like that could benefit from this. And like those are people that we need to account for too. As designers, as user experience designers, we're all here to account for the end user, right? And that's a part of our user base, right?
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, sorry, I got a little sidetracked. The IAAP was a little bit more on, so it's the I in IAAP is international, right? So it was more focused on like international standards that have been going on. It looked at the US, it looked at Europe, and even like a couple of other interesting like smaller governments in like the Middle East and things, just as like, more as examples. But yeah, a lot of what I learned was kind of the history of where these kind of like standards came from. And yeah, that was that was an interesting part. One, I'll say what was interesting about it as well. One, it happened all very recently, right? Like these standards started coming out. I think the earliest ones started coming out in like the 40s and 50s, but then it really started taking hold in towards like the 70s and 80s. And now here we are with like, I'm trying to remember what the most recent one was, but I believe in like the early 2000s is when we really had some solid foundations and from like the UN coming in and like some actual like worldwide standards.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, that was very interesting seeing how kind of like recent it was and seeing all these different like governments try and like have their say in what the international standard should be. And it was, yeah, things like that.
I can imagine, yeah. And we didn't mention before, this is the certification from the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And I imagine that the experience is also you get access or get into this network of and get exposure to not just practices in different countries, but you get to meet people from around the UX world and beyond. Right? So, sounds like it's not just the nuts and bolts of things, but this international community that you get to be a part of.
I need to look into that. I know that there is a directory that you can opt into that I decided to opt into because why wouldn't I? There is a directory and I'm not sure they don't really have like events as far as I'm aware or anything like that, but something to look into. There is something out there.
Sure, there's a lot of ground to cover now. That you're there, you're in, you're certified. So yeah, in that vein, like, yeah, what is the next steps? How do you think this is going to change your practices here at Door Three, or in general, how do you think UX is changing with these new accessibility ideas?
Yeah, well, I'm excited to say that I have already worked on one project. We did start working with kind of another agency actually through that works specifically with the government. Of course, the government cares very much about accessibility. They have to abide by these laws and standards. And so I have since started working a little bit, and it was a very positive experience. It was great seeing an entire group of people who also cared about accessibility. I am hoping that we can get even more clients like that. I think we're going to keep working with these folks. And then beyond that, I would like to start leaving a little bit more of like a footprint on our designs. One, it's something that I do talk about whenever we do have projects, right? There are certain like baseline things that like color contrast. I'm always making sure that the color contrast is okay. that is kind of standard number one, easiest missed and also like easiest to address. So there are like some baseline, considerations that I'm making, also some things to do with like interaction. It just helps me be like a better designer. Again, I kind of touched on it before, but like accessible design is good design. For instance, there are like cognitive disabilities, right? So some people have issues like processing information or like intellectual disabilities. And the answer to that from the like accessibility community is to make things very clear. So, right? That's
Makes
just
sense.
good UX anyways. Yeah, exactly. So all the time I'm kind of leveraging accessibility. It's just in small everyday ways, and I'm hoping to, one, bring that out a little bit more and have, get more contracts where we are doing more, like, dedicated accessibility work, and beyond that, kind of just, like, I'm really excited to be there as this resource for my team and continue to kind of just, like, educate the rest of my team, as that's super useful too, and it makes us all better designers, so, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's one of the interesting parts about working at Door 3 is the teams are horizontal and everyone brings their unique expertise and it all comes together to synergize into how we do our work so successfully. And yeah, like you said, how that not just stuff you can bring to your individual product projects, but expanding our offerings for accessibility audits and design compliance, all these avenues that are open now. Yeah, it's the future is bright. I I am interested because this is some that other UX designers I'm sure are looking into and stuff. Do you have some good resources or advice for designers, businesses, and so forth looking to pursue not just the certification, but in general, having their accessibility standards be raised and thinking more about this kind of dimension of design?
Yes, most definitely. Okay, so when I was doing a lot of my own research, which I think is almost I wouldn't like necessarily say get your all of your knowledge. I wouldn't say that the IAAP certification is going to, give you all of the knowledge that you need to know. It's more of like that fundamental getting your mindset in the right place and understanding like ethically and where all of these kind of regulations and things came from. Where I would start is there is a really good YouTube series that I stumbled across.
Hmm.
I believe it was made by Google. It was made by like Chrome for developers. I'll find it and we can like share the link wherever it is. But it's like an AllyCast video, I think, and they go through, honestly, from a lot is from the developer side. But that's a great starting point because a lot of accessibility is addressed on the development side, right? Like design has these making things clear, easy to use, and also doing things like color contrast. But when you're using a keyboard, for instance, a lot of that is actually on the way that you're interacting with this interface. And so
Mhm.
you need to make sure that the code behind the scenes is actually like, is it works, right?
Right.
It like
Good
actually
point.
functions the way it needs to. Yeah, so it does take more of a developer side, but it's a really, really, really good starting point, and I think, yeah, it was one of the most helpful resources for me, and it goes through, like, some different, like, things to consider when you're actually, like, writing code, and so that's good for everybody to know, good for, like,
Mhm.
accessibility audits and things like that, and then it goes into, like, the specific different types of assistive technologies.
Okay.
And so you see somebody use like a switch device, which is
Mhm.
really interesting. It's like a two-button device, for people who have like mobility issues
Hmm.
and they can only like tap like a finger or
Right.
something like that. Or like or on a phone, you use like the up and down volume buttons
Mm.
to kind of simulate that. So you get to see all of these like different devices and how it actually gets used and how people actually use them.
Hmm.
So I highly recommend that one. And then I'll also throw out just one more. There is an organization kind of called A11Y. So that stands for accessibility. It's just A, and then there's 11 letters in between the A and the Y. So A11Y. It stands for accessibility. It's just
Interesting.
shorthand essentially. And they have a website called the A11Y Project. So they have like checklists that you can look at. They have a bunch of
Wow.
articles and reading that you can do. Yeah, there's a lot of like just gold, a lot of good information on that site. But yeah, those are some good resources.
Excellent. Yeah, and we can put some links and also to the certification site when we post this
Yeah.
interview. Awesome. No, this is exciting. And is there anything else about the experience you want to share? It sounds like it puts you in a real good place to make the moves where you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that I've always been passionate about, and I'm really excited to, call myself a certified professional. I'm not sure, I don't know. Come to me if you have like questions about it. I don't know what else to say.
No,
But,
that's great.
like I'm
Thanks.
here. I love talking about it.
No,
And yeah.
that's very generous. Thanks for your time. I mean, this has been interesting to learn more about, and yeah, bright things to come.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great.
Absolutely.